Saludos a toda la afición de Lucha Libre Online. Este que les habla es Michael Morales Torres, integrante del equipo de Lucha Libre Online. Y tenemos el enorme privilegio de presentarles a nuestro invitado especial en la tarde de hoy, directamente desde Estados Unidos para el mundo. Lo vimos en WWE como Desmond Troy, como Denzel Dejournette. Ahora Jaxson llega aquí por primera vez a Lucha Libre Online. Mr. Jaxson, it is an honor for us to have you as our guest. How are things going your way?
Things are going well right now. Cannot complain. No complaints.
Awesome, brother. Before we start this, I wanted to ask, okay, you were an amateur wrestler, you were a pro wrestler as well, but were you a fan of the industry prior to deciding do this for a living?
I wasn't like a super fan growing up, so there's a lot of details that maybe that I didn't know when I first came into the business, but I knew all the big names and I knew all the big storylines. But I think as I got towards middle school, I kind of started getting out of it. And then I remember being younger, always wondering, like, how do people get into WWE? Because for basketball, you play in college, football, you play in college. Like there's like a gateway, but this wrestling, like when I wrestled in high school, there's no like, it's completely different. Like it's an actual circle and not a square circle. And there's no chairs and there's no punching. It's just grappling. So I was a fan, but I started to get out of it as I got older, started finding other interests.
Which were the wrestlers or the athletes or the company that caught your eye enough to maybe think, hey, I can try this in the future?
It was WWE because honestly, growing up, I just knew the mainstream one, which was WWE. I honestly didn't even know that there was an independent circuit or other promotions until I had my tryout, because people were saying I came from the indies. I was like, what is that? I mean, I kind of put two and two together, like independent, but like, I was like, what is that?
So you didn't know about the independent scene. You were more into the mainstream media. Do you had the opportunity to go to a show in person at one point of your life prior to do this for a living, or you didn't went to a WWE show at least prior?
I never went to one prior. Well,
wow.
I think it was either after I got signed or after I had a tryout, they had Starrcade in Greensboro. I think it was in 2017. So I went to that. But before that, no.
So we will get to the amateur wrestling, but this is really interesting. And we will get to the signing part as well. This is your first show as a fan slash as a wrestler as well. Your first live in-person show, but you're signing with the biggest company in the world while seeing it. Like, what are the emotions going through your head at that moment?
Having my first show, going to my first show and being signed, it was such a big deal. It was so surreal seeing the whole big production. It's like I get to be a part of that and seeing how everybody going crazy. And like one day they can be cheering for me in the middle of that squared circle. And they had like a tribute to either Dusty Rhodes or Ric Flair. And the reason why I'm kind of shaky on that is because I know that Dusty Rhodes had recently passed, but also we're in North Carolina. So, and I know that Ric Flair says like he's billed from Charlotte. So I believe it was one of those, but it might have been even a mix, or they made a big deal about Ric Flair coming out honoring Dusty Rhodes. But I do remember Ric Flair coming out, and I even believe Ricky Steamboat was there. It was. I remember it was very, very cool. So like they really threw everything at the wall at their Greensboro show.
Being born in North Carolina, well, the Carolinas itself, it is a really rich place for pro wrestling itself. Did that influence your career pathway, or at least going and trying, for a amateur wrestling team, or not at all?
You said for amateur wrestling?
For amateur wrestling, for pro wrestling, like does being from the Carolinas itself, from North Carolina in your case, did that motivated you a little bit extra, knowing all the pathway, the Hardys and many people are from North Carolina. So is that something that motivated you even more, knowing that there are few other wrestlers that came out from your home state?
Yeah, because you don't really hear many great people coming out of North Carolina for something. Like you still have like a group of people, but it's like a smaller state. So like you don't hear like it's not like a New York or California or a Georgia or even a Florida. So when you hear about them, especially from areas that's like kind of close to you, like hearing that Ric Flair was built out of Charlotte. Oh, okay, yeah. Hearing about the Hardy Boys being from the area, it's like, okay, it can be done, because you hear more about people from North Carolina mostly for basketball.
Yeah.
So when you see somebody come out there for wrestling, it's like, oh, okay, it can be done.
So why wrestling and no basketball? Why pro wrestling, why amateur wrestling and no other sport? Football, for example, like you have the physics and the athleticism to do anything you wanted to do. Why pro wrestling, or at that point amateur wrestling, was the thing for you?
So I wanted to play football my freshman year, but I didn't. So I think going into my sophomore year, I tried out for the basketball team, because they said to play football next year, you had to either wrestle or play basketball. I tried out for basketball, and I did not make the basketball team. But it's not like the Michael Jordan story where he didn't make it on varsity as a sophomore. I was so bad that I didn't make it on the 9th grade team. So that's 9th grade, that's JV, and that's varsity at my school. I didn't make the 9th grade team. So I was like, well, I guess I have to wrestle. And that is how I got into wrestling. I wish it was like, oh my gosh, I saw the coach walk past and he saw me. It's like, oh yeah, you got the tools. Or I was like, oh, I always wanted to do this because it's just something about being able to control somebody's body and being able to beat them against their will. No, I didn't make the basketball team, and I wanted to play football the next year. And they lied. You did not have to play basketball or wrestle to play football the next year, but I'm glad that I did.
Man, as you entered the wrestling career, your record, it was simply impressive. I believe it was 27-8 in high school in your last year prior to doing the transition to college. What was the biggest thing for you to do that transition from high school into college amateur wrestling? Do you feel any extra pressure on you?
Going from high school to college?
Correct.
Okay, so I don't know where the 27-8 came from, because my senior year of high school, I was like 43-1, and I lost in the state finals. And the only reason why I'm like making that correction about like the record was because I think that's what motivated me going into college, because the guy that I lost to in the state finals, he ended up going to the same school that I did. So we're the same weight class. So now I see the guy that beat me every day in high school for the state championship. So that was one of the things that's like, man, I'm never going to let him beat me again. Like that was one of the things that pushed me. And I wasn't trying to, like, when I say like talking about the record, it's just that the record in this situation was important, talking about the story moving forward.
So it's 43-1. You had an even impressive record, an even more impressive record at that point. You enter into college wrestling, the NCAA at this point. Mm-hmm. Do you saw any people that you recognize as a wrestler, maybe that are being pro wrestlers right now? Because it's not that common that an amateur wrestler actually decides to go inside the pro wrestling industry right now. Like, it was pretty common back then, but at this point, I've seen many of them made the transition to MMA, for example. Do you recall any people you've wrestled in your amateur wrestling career that are doing, or that you came at least at the same event, that are doing something right now? Like, you got to the WWE, man. Like, that's the top. Like, but do you recall any of your other peers reaching to other places?
Yeah, as far as like, so there was one person that I wrestled, Julius Creed, Jacob Casper.
Of course.
We wrestled each other. He's in WWE. But outside of that, I don't think there were many like guys that did, like, it might have been guys that did MMA, but I think it was on a smaller scale. Like, it wasn't like UFC or Bellator. Actually, I take that back, because my favorite wrestler when I was in college was Ed Ruth. And he went on to have a fighting career, but now he's a coach. And I don't know if he's still fighting, trying to fight, but I know now he's an assistant coach. I don't know if it's NC State. It used to be NC State at one point, but I don't know if he went to another school. But so Ed Ruth, and Julius Creed now.
What was your record for the NCAA championship?
Like my college record, like my whole NCAA record.
Yeah.
So my NCAA record was 113 and 37, 38, wow, or something like that. So yeah, my first couple years wasn't the greatest, but we redeemed it.
You earned 113 W's in your career. That's more than impressive, enough to impress the biggest company of pro wrestling and sports entertainment in the world, WWE. Yeah. How do you went from being NCAA wrestler with that impressive record? How do you went from being that NCAA wrestler with 113 and 30 something defeats to get signed by the WWE? I mean, you had everything in your hands in order to achieve that. But one thing is achieving it. Like, when was the moment WWE actually got to you and requested, hey, do you want to sign a contract with us? Do you want to go into a tryout with us? Like, when was the exact moment WWE reached you from the NCAA?
So there was a tournament in California that we had as the Roadrunner Open, and it was in Fresno, California. Or no, it was at Bakersfield, or it was Bakersfield's tournament. I remember that. And I remember this was like going into my breakout year. So I remember getting off. I think I was about to go to the semifinals or either going to the finals. I can't remember, but I'm just going through like the area, I guess, where it says like concourse, like, you go, like, you can go into the stands and all of that, like that big circular area on the outside. So I'm just walking around, I think about to go back to where my team is sitting, and Jerry Briscoe came to me and said, hey, are you the guy that just wrestled from App State? I'm like, yes, sir, that's me. And then he pulls out his card and it says Jerry Briscoe, WWE Talent Scout. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. Like, this answered my question for years and years ago, is like, how do people become WWE wrestlers? And he said, he gave me basically like a rundown, like, I'm a talent scout for WWE, and I'm very interested in you. I like your size, your speed, your athleticism. Basically, he kept it short and sweet. He said, give me a call after you All-American, I can change your life. And being a young kid, I like the sound of that.
So Briscoe, man, after all, like, he discovered so many people inside the industry. He discovered you as well. So, okay, you received the card. What was next? Like, you gave him a call and requested him a tryout. Like, what was the formal process you went through to get into the #1 company inside the world?
Yeah, so after All-American, my senior year, I gave him a call and said, hey, I'm very interested. And then he said, okay, I'm going to call you. And then he gave me the rundown of like, basically like how it works. Like, you get a tryout. If you make it, how much money you can potentially make. He gave it kind of like a range of how much money you can make. And then it was just saying like, okay, I can't guarantee anything, but I can get you a tryout. And I was like, okay. And then I ended up getting the tryout.
You were in the tryout. Was that, the tryout, was it what you expected? Because many people describe it as a boot camp mentality or a military training. Like, it is really, really tough. But you being a natural athlete, like, do you face any struggles over there?
So I'll be honest, I don't really think that I did. And it's not even necessarily because I'm a natural athlete. There's a quote by Dan Gable that once you wrestle, everything else is easy. So our season was over in March for collegiate wrestling, and going into the tryout, I think my trial was in June. I think it was like the weekend before Father's Day. And so I was still kind of training with the team, kind of helping with them, like, because even though I was done, they were going to do something called Universities, which is like a freestyle tournament. So freestyle and Greco tournament. So I was helping out with them. So I was still kind of training. So honestly, it wasn't as bad for me, because anybody that knows people that come from a wrestling background, like, it's tough. Like, whether you're good or bad, one thing you will be is conditioned. So I didn't feel like it was as bad for me.
Man, you had the opportunity to go along with a lot of people inside the same tryout. And on July 2018, WWE announced their new class. Along with them, it's a young amateur wrestler with the name Denzel Dejournette.
Right.
What were, being a fan all your life, what were the things going through your mind, seeing this picture, this announcement, I'm part of this class, I'm part of the #1 company in the world, I made it. Like, what was the thing going inside your mind at that moment?
The first thing was when I saw that picture, it's like, man, I should have got a haircut. What was I thinking? But outside of that, it was a good feeling because it was kind of like validation that because you have to be a good athlete to make it there. So it's validation that like with the name itself, it's like, okay, this is a big deal. But also I tried to keep myself humbled because anything can happen. And also there's certain pathways to get here and not everybody's pathway is the same. I didn't have to do the independent route, which was from what I heard from a lot of people was very, very tough.
Mhm.
So I was also humbled and fortunate. And I didn't take that for granted because I've heard stories and I was like, "Ooh, that sounds terrible."
Yeah, people go through a lot of things. People go through a lot of things in their career in the independent circuit. In your case, you at least you didn't have to do that. You went directly to the top. Like you were good enough to go directly straight to the top. Many people, once they enter the WWE system, they can be on the bench for years. Not
Yep.
you. You
Yeah.
made your debut inside your first year. I believe it was in a live event, and you were in a contender battle royal match for the NXT North American Championship. Going through that curtain, seeing the people you're sharing the ring with, seeing the fans, seeing everything. This is your first pro wrestling match, and it is with WWE, man. Like, how do you feel at that moment?
Really nervous. Really nervous. Like when I first started, and even kind of like now, like my energy is different when I have a match than when I don't. And that's because I'm more focused. It's a little bit of like nervous energy, but it's not like crippling nervous energy, but it's like, okay, I apologize. So there was a lot of nervous energy but it was channeled in the right direction. So I was nervous, but I was also very excited. And the cool thing is, it's a quote that Mike Tyson says, like when he comes out, he's nervous, but as he gets closer and closer to the ring, you start to build confidence. And I started to build confidence, especially because it was a battle royale. So I was in there with people that I was comfortable with. So it wasn't as much pressure as having a singles match because it isn't like me versus just one other person that everybody's watching us to. Like it took a little bit of pressure off knowing that there's so many different faces in there and they're kind of watching everything.
So that kid from North Carolina, and sorry for this word, but that busts his ass in order to achieve everything he's achieved in his life, that he worked for everything, that he went through this amateur career, finally had the opportunity to make his TV debut with NXT. That was on 2020, I believe, against Cameron Grimes. You being on a TV taping, you being in your television debut, your family is able to see you, your friends are able to see you as well. Everyone is able to see you. You're able to recap that match once again. But for you, one thing is making your non-televised debut. Another thing completely different is making your TV debut, and you did it against Cameron Grimes. How do you felt knowing that, like, I made it to TV, I'm good enough to be here?
I felt good. And there was another thing that I noticed that like when they will have, because if I'm being honest, all of my matches that were televised for the most part were enhancement matches. It was for the other person. So the fact that they continuously use me, I was like, okay, there has to be some form of trust there. So the sense that I'm good enough to be on TV, and also there's some form of trust there because they could have easily grabbed an extra or different people and just kind of cycle them through. So it was something that's like, okay, I'm being trusted. So, it may not be where you want to be, but it was also very inspiring. And when they started to put people on TV, it was very inspiring to see like they were doing like different vignettes for people and they were really amping it up. And I was like, man, this is cool. Like, I can't wait to be on that side of the token. So it was very inspiring. So, okay, we're knocking off steps. You got to get there. Because I know a lot of coaches had told me, they said, hey, don't get discouraged. Everybody had to do this and all that stuff. But I was like, I'm not necessarily discouraged because it's still an opportunity. So I was excited about it, and it didn't really bother me that much.
My question for you is, okay, you got used to what wrestling is, and suddenly a pandemic hits. There's no people in the arenas.
Right.
And everything changed, and we're not on big venues anymore. We are not on Full Sail Arena. We're on the Performance Center. And suddenly an opportunity came through your hands. And you just made your debut in NXT on a TV match. Now you're on Raw. Right. You're with Seth freaking Rollins in the same ring, maybe 2 weeks after WrestleMania, maybe a week and a half after WrestleMania. April 2020, middle of a pandemic. Seth freaking Rollins and a young kid called Desmond Troy, both in the same ring. To you as a human, not only the athlete part, the human part as well, having the opportunity to be in the same ring with Seth Rollins, how did it felt, for you? What went through your mind? What went through your mind knowing that? Good to go.
So the moment was pretty cool because it was the week after WrestleMania. So everybody's watching it, wanting to know like what's happening with the aftermath about that. So I knew a lot of eyes were going to be on me. And even though it was more about Seth Rollins, for sure, I mean, I definitely called my mom and I told her to tell everybody I'll be on TV. I said, hey, don't have your expectations high, but I will be on national TV on Monday Night Raw, because everybody knows Monday Night Raw, whether they watch it still or not. They know Monday Night Raw, that's a staple. So I was like, hey, I'm gonna be on TV, turn it on, but hey, don't get too upset because it ain't gonna go in my favor.
Man, you had the opportunity as well to be on SmackDown. Few days after, I believe 11 days after, you went one-on-one again against the former WWE World Champion Sheamus. After that, you faced Bobby Lashley as well as a World Heavyweight Champion. Like, your stint in the main roster was literally against the top guys of the whole company. For you as a human as well, not only as an athlete, as a competitor, but as a human, how did it feel knowing that, man, my mom is going to be able to see me on TV. I will have the opportunity to show this to my kids, to my future kids, to everyone around. Like, this is it. Like, you made it to the top against the cream of the crop. How do you feel as a person knowing that the young kid that started watching this finally made it to the top?
It felt good, especially because like it was kind of like a streak. Like it all happened so fast. Like 1 week I was on Raw, so I was like, okay, that's gonna be a one-off, obviously. Like, well, I remember when I got the text message, I got you a match with Rollins. I said, I know exactly how this is gonna go. And then I got a message the next week, hey, we need you for SmackDown. Hey, we need you for Raw again. Hey, we need you for main event. I was like, oh, okay, this is starting to look good. I'm getting eyes on me because I know for a fact that Vince is watching SmackDown and Raw because he was there at the Performance Center. So I was like, okay, this is cool. I get to be seen, and so, and then people started to recognize me. Like, there was like Paul Heyman, he called me Shooter, so he understood. Even if I don't know if he remembered my name or not, but he knew kind of like what my background was, just because he's seen me week after week with my singlet on. I was able to meet Vince McMahon. Gave him the fist bump, or like the good job and all of that. So. It was very cool because, I mean, you hear about Vince McMahon and you hear about the WWE, you know who Paul Heyman is. Like, even if you're not a super fan, like, those names. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I was able to meet some really cool people in the locker room.
Dude, there are people that may work there for years and never interact with Vince McMahon. I need to ask. His presence is huge. Like, he's on a building, the fist bump, the good work, the thank you for being here in this difficult moment. Like, how do you feel being one-on-one with the boss, with the number one mind inside the wrestling industry?
It was very surreal. because like I said, you hear the name. And even like being in NXT when I was like, it was kind of like Vince was another like entity, another like deity. Like it was like Vince don't like, because you never see a Vince, you never see Vince, you hear a Vince. Like when it comes to be like, you might see him on TV, but when it comes to actually being in the company, you don't see him, you hear him. Because even then, like they'd be like, Vince don't like this, Vince don't like that. But like when you meet Vince, he's kind of like, well, also I'm not one of his like main guys, but it's kind of just like good job and the fist bump. So he doesn't really say much around me. Like when I've been around him, he didn't really say much. But when you hear like, oh, Vince hates this or Vince loves this, it's like, man, every time I seen him, it was kind of like a neutral, like it just like, he was very neutral on everything. So it was very, very cool to kind of like finally meet him face to face or to see him face to face.
You being a natural competitor all your life, having an impressive record both in high school and in college, how do you manage to make that mental transition, knowing that, you know, pro wrestling, sometimes you have to lose. In pro wrestling, you need to make it work in order for your partner to look good as well. So both of you can look good. Not all the times you're gonna win. But if you go one-on-one on shoot wrestling with 99% of the roster, highly probable they will lose to you. You know, physically and ability-wise, you had everything to defeat them. But that transition from that mental state, from I'm winning everything, I'm gonna win anything I can, that high school and NCAA mentality versus the pro wrestling mentality, like how do you manage to do that healthy transition?
Well, it's pretty easy because I'm the type of person, like I am a competitor, but I understand what I'm competing in. So when I was in high school and college and I was on a wrestling mat, and it really like, it was about winning and it's not about telling the story. And most of the time in sports, the story tells themselves. But it was just a different mentality, like, hey, I want to beat this person. Now, when it gets to professional wrestling, yes, you want to beat them because you beat them. That means that you're the face of a company. If you're continuously beating people, if you're always winning, that means that you're known in the company and you're trusted. But it was just at that point, I didn't really care. Like some people's like, yeah, I remember, I don't want to say any names, but I remember when I was doing like the matches at the Performance Center, when they was doing, when I was doing Raw, SmackDown, I kept coming every week. There was a pretty famous wrestler, I would say, that said, hey man, aren't you a shooter and can like kill all of us? And I was like, yeah. But like, you know, not like, yeah, I can. I was like, I mean, I guess. Like, and he said, why are they jobbing you out every week and stuff like that, joking, obviously. And I said, I don't know, I just do what they tell me to do. And he said, me too. I was like, yeah, but the stuff they telling you to do is a lot cooler than the stuff they're telling me to do. But that was cool because even then when we walk in, we had to have our mask on. So like when I had my mask on and this person recognized me and they're like famous, like a really big deal, that was like also a source of like validation. So it was like, yeah, it doesn't really matter to me. And he was joking when he said it wasn't like, hey, yeah, go out there and try to, you know, win on national television, because we know how that would end up. But I just thought that was really cool. And I just know how to, like, what I need to do and what I get myself into when I get into collegiate wrestling or wrestling in high school or professional wrestling when it's a production and a show.
Unfortunately, due to the pandemic and the situation, WWE, due to, and I quote, budget cuts, decided to part separate ways with multiple talent.
Right.
A lot of talent. Bray Wyatt, for example, people that nobody expected. And unfortunately, you were on that list.
Right.
Let's not talk about the complicated part. Now you are a free agent. Now you're hungry. And for the first time in your life, you're going to experience the independent circuit. But you don't come as an independent guy. You come as a former WWE wrestler. Now there's AEW, there's Impact Wrestling, there's Ring of Honor, there's MLW, there's New Japan Pro Wrestling, AAA, Consejo Mundial de Lucha in Mexico as well. There are wrestling companies all around the world, Pro Wrestling Noah. How do you feel knowing that you're about to experience a completely different world to what you've experienced before? Are you nervous? Are you anxious? Are you thrilled? Are you excited about it? How do you feel?
So it's a combination of all of those things. I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm excited because I mean, when you think about it, like it's been 2 months at this point, but it's different than what I'm used to. So it's like getting accustomed to something and then everything changes, whether it's for the better or if it's for worse. Like it just takes some adjusting. Like going from being a collegiate wrestler going to WWE, there was like those same things. Like it's just because it's different. Like you know that it's greener pastures and all that stuff, and great things can happen. Going from WWE to the independent circuit, luckily now, well, I don't know if it's always been that way, but now there's a lot of opportunities for wrestling. So people can still wrestle, and it's not like a fall from grace. Like some people look at it that way, but there's opportunities there, but it's different. Like it's not like it used to be. But it's exciting because you get to kind of tell your own story. And one person that I do look at when I see that is a Drew McIntyre. When they told him, now that's a redemption story. That's that fall from grace into their redemption story, because they said, hey, this guy is on national TV. This guy's our future. And this is who we're going to build our company around. And then he got released. And then he came, look at him now. Like he came back, he won a championship. He's always in the running. He's a contender for the championship. Like that's the type of story that I want to have. Like, yes, I was in the biggest wrestling company in the world, but you know, things happen, budget cuts, whatever it may be, and you just got to keep going. So I'm excited to have that redemption story, because one thing about me, I'm big on motivation, and no one wants to hear a motivation story about a guy that's winning his whole life. It's cool. We love seeing LeBron kill it, but even then, like the thing, like we want to see the person. That's the reason why LeBron James versus Steph Curry was so important, because Steph Curry was always good, but he was like the underdog, and he had to really like kind of slide into certain positions that he was in. LeBron James was the golden child from the get-go. So, you know, I'd rather be Steph Curry than LeBron James, because there's a better story to that. Or Tom Brady.
Who is Cam Jaxson? We saw the video, we saw the payback tour, we saw this redemption tour he's having. But who exactly is Cam Jaxson? We saw Desmond Troy. We know who Denzel Dejournette is. But I see a different vibe from Cam Jaxson than to the other two guys. Who exactly is Cam Jaxson?
Cam Jaxson is Denzel Dejournette, but just with a different moniker. And what I mean by that, when I had Desmond Troy, I'm going to be honest, I wanted to be like a Tyson-esque type person. So I think that's already was the mistake, that it's nice to have influences, but when you say somebody else's name and you saying, who are you? That's already a lose situation. So Cam Jaxson is me. And the reason why I have lights Cam Jaxson, because when I was in college, I was a heavyweight. And if you go in order, the heavyweight is last. Sometimes they'll do a draw and it goes in random, but when you're a heavyweight, you're last. People used to see heavyweights as boring. Like it might be a 3-2 match. Like you win 3-2. It really comes down to taking somebody down and just really boring to watch. And I remember I didn't want to be that guy. Like I wanted to be the main event. Like, so I wanted people to stay for the heavyweight. So that's the reason why, like, I was always athletic, but I wanted to make it exciting. So people are, oh, we can't leave because Denzel's about to wrestle. So Cam Jaxson is that person. So that's the reason why I say lights Cam Jaxson. It ain't about, because some people, oh, you know, they thinking like maybe actor or Hollywood. No, it's like, I'm just exciting. Like in every thrill of the word, like I'm explosive. I can throw you around. I can move. Like that's who Cam Jaxson is. And I wanted a name that embodied that. Like to me, the name Cam Jaxson sounds like a good athlete. That sounds like the high school, and I wasn't this, but the high school quarterback or the captain of the basketball team, the captain of the football. Like it sounds like somebody. So that's who Cam Jaxson is. It's somebody that's wanting to be seen and they want the spotlight, but they're not going to be like, oh, give me the spotlight. I'm just going to show you. It's not a man. I'm going to talk my stuff now. Don't get me wrong. But as far as it's not like, hey, I'm the best. No, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to kind of talk. I'm going to talk it too a little bit.
Man, before we go to our last two questions, Cam Jaxson, you only, as far as I know, you wrestle in the States, but there's wrestling in Puerto Rico, there's wrestling in Chile, Argentina, Panama, Spain, France, United Kingdom, Japan, Singapore, South Korea, and to other promoters that want Cam Jaxson there, they can have him. They can get their services. They just need to go to camjacksonbookings@gmail.com. Send him a message on camjacksonbookings@gmail.com. This will appear down here in order to get his services as a wrestler. As well, they can follow him on social media as likes Cam Jaxson on Instagram, and Cam Jaxson on Twitter, in order to just reach out to him. If you don't want to go through an email, could just send him a DM, and believe me, he's the guy you definitely need on your company. Doesn't matter where you are, former amateur wrestler, former WWE guy, trained by the best ones, wrestler on Raw, wrestler on SmackDown, wrestler on NXT, wrestler everywhere, even on Evolve. So this is the person everyone needs in the company. But what does Cam Jaxson want to do? Where does he want to wrestle? Who does he want to wrestle? Like, what do you want to do knowing that you're about to experience something completely different?
Honestly, I want to wrestle any and everybody. I just really want to elevate my game even more. So, you know, there's names out there that I would want to wrestle like, but honestly, because I mean, I can make it specific, like, you know, I would like to wrestle Jay Lethal. I would like to wrestle Moose, Eddie Kingston, John Moxley, and then, you know, people outside of WWE. Like, I just would like to wrestle anybody. Like, anybody that I know that can elevate my game. Somebody that I know that when I get in that ring, when I walk out, just by being in the ring with them, not even like talking to him before or after, I learned something. Like, those are the type of guys. Like, I would like to lock up with Weston Blake again. That's my guy right there. Like, that was my first ever live event match, like singles. And man, going with him, it was like, I can't praise him enough. Like, he was great. Like, that's the type of wrestler that I would want to be. Like, somebody that you just know that he knows his stuff and he's always where he needs to be. And I don't know, man, he's just for me, the perfect embodiment of a great wrestler.
Man, this makes everyone excited, because usually the career pathways the opposite. Like, you go from the independents to WWE, now you're coming with a different mindset, with a hungrier mind, looking forward to face everybody in the independent circuit. So this is really interesting. Last but not least, what message can you send to the fans out there that are listening to you right now, that are supporting you, that have been supporting you since day one, the ones that got in the bus while it was running, and people that are willing to follow Cam Jaxson as well? What message can you send them so they won't take their eyes off you, because you are going to be that next Drew McIntyre, or that next person with the redemption career, the redemption pathway, that's Steph Curry, for example. Right. Broken ankles, being co-captain for Monta Ellis in the same team at one point, among many other people. Like, you want to be and have that redemption story. What message can you send to the fans out there so they can follow you in this pathway?
The message I would like to send out, that this is not the end of Denzel Dejournette. This is not the end of Cam Jaxson. You will see me somewhere. And right now I'm at a point that I have to prove myself. And I love that, because no matter how great you are, you're going to always have to prove yourself. So I'm in that space. I'm in that mind space of, it's not even necessarily about proving people wrong. It's about proving myself right. And I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm exactly where I want to be. And this isn't a fall from grace. This is just the startup for my redemption story. So please, please continue to support me, either Denzel Dejournette or Cam Jaxson. I appreciate any support that comes my way. And I'm very appreciative for each and every one of you that either watches this or follow me on any of my social media platforms.
It's likes Cam Jaxson on Instagram and Cam Jaxson on Twitter. Mr. Jaxson, as mentioned in the beginning of this interview, thank you very much for your time, for being here with us. It is an honor for us to have you here as our guest. Always wishing you success in your career and in your personal life as well. And let's hope to see more of Cam Jaxson in every single wrestling company all around the world, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's wrap this up en español. Este fue Cam Jaxson y Michael Morales Torres para Lucha Libre Online, la marca número 1 de Pro Wrestling y Combat Sports en español.